So thanks a lot for the invitation. I was actually quite pleased and in fact, pleasantly surprised that there is actually a smart communities cluster out there, that there are companies really focusing on developing solutions for smart cities. So it was a great pleasure to prepare this presentation, which is focusing on really the policy context at the European level on smart cities, smart communities, as well as some funding opportunities, in particular for companies that would be active in this field. As you probably have, and I heard you a little bit discussing on the RRF, you know that the current Commission has quite a huge emphasis on making Europe fit for the digital age, but also helping to increase our carbon neutrality and becoming more sustainable and environmentally friendly with the Green Deal. And these two policies actually, in the context of smart cities, really meet and really demonstrate this ambition of creating this twin digital green transition in Europe. So we see that smart cities can really pull these two together, these two policy objectives forward. And this is represented also in our digital strategies. If you will have seen a digital strategy and the AI strategy, the data strategy, they all try to help Europe become the leader in digital technology, but at the same time try to see how digital technologies can help better resource management and create more sustainable environments, but also how the digital technologies can actually themselves become greener. And as you have also probably discussed, certain percentage, for example, of the recovery fund should also go both to digital and to green. You may have seen the most recent digital strategy, the Digital Compact, way for the digital decade, how we're trying to prepare Europe for 2030 to become really for this digital era. What is really driving specifically the smart cities and smart communities policy area is, of course, in this bigger context, policy context, is a specific focus on how to help the digital transformation of cities and communities in Europe the European way. Some of you may have heard about this, but if not, I invite you to look at this political declaration called Living in EU, is pulling together cities around the EU, but also other levels of government to sign a declaration, to join a community, to go through a digital transformation that would be following some BU values, some solutions that would enable interoperability, open standard-based solutions that would not lock cities into certain solutions. Of course, from a company's point of view, would enable a fair market for smart city solutions. This community is actually coming together, as you will see, based around a number of principles, but also a number of commitments. And beyond the cities and the governments, there's also a list of supporters who can subscribe to this kind of principles and become part of this community that we work with, that we try to help in particular to implement open standard-based interoperable local data platforms and have access to data and data sharing, and eventually implement also, for example, AI-enabled solutions at smart cities level. Once again, for example, respecting GDPR and allowing cities to be able to control personal data and citizens' digital rights, and also ensuring a fair smart city market. With this political background in mind, our focus, at least coming from DG Connect, which is really the technological DG, as you know, trying to create the generic technological enablers that all cities in Europe and communities, we kind of look at all kinds of sizes of cities, communities, municipalities could benefit from. Apart from connectivity, which is naturally an enabler, we focus on enabling access to relevant data, enabling interoperable platforms, as I have mentioned, and helping cities to experiment so-called local digital twins, AI-enabled intelligent digital twins. And for that, we will have some funding predominantly from the Digital Europe program, some also from Horizon Europe, and a little bit also from the Connecting Europe facility to CEF2. So just to remind ourselves, be talking about data, platforms, and twins. In terms of data, you may have heard the data strategy, the European Commission's data strategy, that the ambition is to create a data space, a European common data space. But in order to do that, we're doing that by sectors to start with. And the data strategy has foreseen a number of sectoral data spaces. You may have seen one for manufacturing, one for mobility. You may have heard also about the developments for the energy data space. And there's also a data space in the making, or at least the ambition is there to create a data space for the Green Deal, for Green Deal objectives. As part of that data space, we're actually working with cities and communities and also other stakeholders to create a data space for climate neutral and smart communities. So basically a data space, which means really like a secure environment where data can be shared among those who agree on a set of conditions among themselves based on a number of terms and conditions that could be licensing agreements, financial agreements, that could be all kinds of access rights management and so on within a certain community relevant to cities and communities. What we've seen is that, of course, cities often get access to data coming from the cities that are publicly available or open data, but oftentimes this data is not necessarily out in the open. It could be sensitive data. Very often, and this is one of the biggest difficulties for cities, they have difficulties accessing, for example, data held by private organizations or by citizens. And this approach, this creation of a data space, should overcome this. It doesn't mean that the data has to be made available for free, but in a certain within certain conditions. And for that, there's already a number of legislative actions from the Commission, as you may have seen the Data Governance Act, which foresees, for example, a specific role, so-called data intermediaries who could help in setting up the governance of such data spaces, or it foresees, for example, the notion of data altruism. But there will also be something called the Data Act, which will also kind of suggest some approaches for business to government data sharing. We've done some studies, and we understand that there's, of course, different ways to access such data, but these solutions don't necessarily scale up. What we would like to do is really help companies to be able to create really easily portable solutions. And for that, the idea is that you would be able, as a company, access similar types of data under similar conditions across a number of cities in Europe. So that's the idea, to agree on a set of data sets, agree on the governance, agree on the technical architecture on how this data could be actually shared. And this is really the overview, as you will remember from the data strategy. There will be sectoral data spaces, and these will then be supported by a European cloud infrastructure and high-performance computing and AI infrastructure. And of course, some of the data will be public, such as the high value data sets, but there may be others that will not be, and they will be sort of under certain agreements within these sectors. So just to remind ourselves, we're going to be a part of this Green Deal data space, which will have many other initiatives, such as Destination Earth, such as other legislative actions related to to environmental data. But if you're really looking for data spaces for climate neutral and smart communities, this will be somehow linked to this Green Deal data space in the digital Europe program. I also mentioned that we help cities to implement interoperable open standard-based local data platforms. These standards have been developed throughout past years of Horizon 2020 projects and validated through these projects, and have been now accepted by quite a large number of cities. And these are so-called minimal interoperability mechanisms that should be rather simple to ensure a basic interoperability between platforms, between data models, and so on. So this declaration that I had mentioned earlier is basically setting out these standards that continue to be further updated and maintained. And the idea is that these platforms that will basically enable the management of all kinds of sectoral data in a smart city context, be it mobility or energy or waste data, flows and stakeholders as well, would enable to easily expand and create new solutions on top of that, eventually open it to third parties to create even more innovative solutions on top of that. So this will also enable, of course, AI-enabled solutions to run on these platforms because they have a set of open standards. And as I said, our ultimate goal is to really help cities benefit from this technology that you probably have used or heard of, the digital twin, let's say, set of technologies, which have proven to be very helpful, for example, in the manufacturing area or in the health area. And many cities in around the world are also experimenting with this, actually also some already in Europe. And sometimes really at city level, sometimes at regional, even at times at national level, to basically set out or create a virtual image of the city's maybe area, a district, or a community, or its physical assets, or its processes or services, but then also to link it to data and link the physical to the virtual. And so in the virtual setting, you can create, you can map what happened in the past. You can better understand the effectiveness of past policies, but also you can make real-time decisions because it would use real-time data, and eventually even come up with what-if scenarios, simulations, and future predictions. So, of course, not all digital twins are at this level at this stage, but the aim is to really help cities benefit from the data in the sense of really making sense of all the data that is being collected in the context of a city, either static data available by the administrations or collected through sensors, IoT, citizens, and whatsoever. So what we're trying to do is enable cities to benefit from this, to actually test these. There's a number of European projects already experimenting with such twins in different areas. You could, many cities are experimenting in the area of mobility or energy efficiency, urban planning, participatory urban planning, or but could be used for climate, extreme weather, flood detection, and so on. What we see is of course each city will have a different challenge, will have different requirements. However, we're expecting there could be some generic tools that could enable all cities to benefit from this. So our vision is that we would like cities by 2030, the majority of EU cities and communities to have some kind of access to a digital twin that could help or improve their city management, their sustainability and resilience. And by the way, if you were following the Digital Day, which was earlier in March, member states have also signed a declaration, a green and digital transformation, saying that we would like to work with local authorities and other relevant stakeholders to set up a European network of digital twins. So there is an ambition both from the Commission, from member states, but also from cities. We're hearing that more and more cities would like to understand what it takes, how they could experiment with this. So actually we're working with those signatories of the Living in EU declaration that I had mentioned earlier to expose them, to learn more about what digital twins can offer. Now, of course, what we need for this is good examples. So we have quite a lot in Europe, as I had mentioned, some European projects like Duet or LEAD, the more recent one called Urban Age. But then there's also several cities that already have like Helsinki or Rotterdam running twins. But what we would also like to do is be able to give cities some kind of a generic toolbox that they could then use and set out for their specific needs. So you were talking about the RRF earlier, the Recovery and Resilience Fund earlier. We could, for example, foresee the creation of such a toolbox through European Commission funding, such as the digital program, but then each city or each region through the European Regional and Development Funds or the RRF could then actually take on board the implementation itself. So if you now look at this slide, this is basically how we would use the Digital Europe program for smart city related technology developments. As I said earlier, the data space creation, which will consist in creating a blueprint in terms of what it takes technically to set it up, but even more importantly, in terms of governance, how it should look like, what data sets should be part of it, and so on. And we will have some validation pilots to test that it works properly. We will also have some funding available to help cities prepare their procurement for standard-based urban platforms. And as I said, we will have limited funding, but some funding to develop a European toolbox of reusable, generic, standard-based tools that could then lead to the creation of a digital twin, be it related to maybe the data analytics or components related to visualization or modeling and so on. And all this within this movement and spirit of the Living in EU movement. There is some additional funding available that you may want to look into under CEF2 related to 5G communities, so deployment of 5G networks in some communities, some operational digital platforms to contribute to energy and transport digitalization and synergy projects, but also under Horizon Europe, that there is a whole mission to create 100 climate neutral and smart communities, but also under cluster 5 and cluster 4, but mostly cluster 5. We will have some more possibilities for example, further developing urban data platforms. But most of our funding will be related to the digital program. So I would like to thank you with this. Please sign up for our newsletter. There's also quite a lot of workshops that we organize where you can get engaged. Certainly, you're more than welcome to contact me personally. I'll try to help. But indeed, for a cluster like yourselves, I think there's quite a lot of opportunities out there. We're here to help companies to create really a fair European smart cities market. And in fact, going into these directions, platform data sharing and AI-enabled digital twins. Grazie per l'attenzione.